Hi there. This may be an interesting calculation. I did it for Holland, and it probably works for the US as well. But if in Holland you buy a treasury bill for 30 years from the state, you get an interest rate of 4.25% or something like that at the moment. If you, on the other hand, use the same money to invest in a solar power system, PV panels, you'll get a return over the 30 years of 6.5%, which is 2% more. And that means that you pay off the panels and you get the interest. So you get your money back for the panels and you get your interest on top of that. It's much more preferable to do the latter, even though it is a high upfront investment. And let's say if you're a company with a huge amount of dollars in treasury bonds, you should really consider diversifying into energy, diversifying your store of wealth and turn it into a store into energy sources. And the reason is that the energy source that delivers electricity to the grid, that is used by companies to produce anything you want, by farmers to produce the fertilizer, and etc. etc. That's basically the engine behind the productive processes in society. It is also corrected for inflation. Basically, if the price, let's say if you have a treasury bill or you have some kind of bond, and you get 5% of it, but you have runaway inflation, then of course that 5% won't buy you very much, and you basically screwed over from here to Tokyo, as I always say in Holland. And the same comparison goes with gold. If you say, well, if you bought gold a while back, or you bought a treasury, then of course the owner of the gold is much happier because he basically saw his price quintuple or whatever, and the bond simply had the yield that was given by the state. So it's much smarter now. If you are an investor and you are considering where do I go with my money, go to the yen, to the dollar, to the gold, to the silver, then make it very easy for yourself. Go into renewable energies, and 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 of course you might say, well, but it's dangerous and these might get damaged and all that stuff. And that's, I think, it's an unnecessary weakness, because it's simply that is true. Renewables industry is attacked by the banking oligarchy. They are basically constantly damaged, and oh, so much trouble that you hear, and the fact that they're on the stock exchange and that they're manipulated down and people become pessimistic, and all these projects that are fake by banks to squat territory that is used for solar thermal, or basically the buyout of a solar thermal project by a PV project, which is much more carbon intensive. That's why it's happening. All these things are going on. If you want it to stop, you have to diversify into these renewable sources, because it will teach the banks that they can have cash flow based on renewables. If you don't apply robo economics as I described it, pure sang, then then just teach the banks that they can be a bank for a renewable powered society. And it's much wiser, because not only are you storing wealth somewhere, but you're actually producing. And I calculated that you can take any cost that you have at the moment. If you were able to invest enough, so if you were able to take out a loan that is big enough, you could buy off any cost in your life in 20 years. So that basically means that there's a huge, and of course it's due to the whole price, the energy intensity of solar panels, I should say, at the moment, which can of course be lowered if you make them with solar panels, or you make them with solar thermal energy, which is also possible. You can make ingots of silicon with solar thermal energy, and it would of course cut the price another 30% of these solar panels, but they're not doing it. Long story short. But if Reagan would have wanted in the 80s, when Shell was hoarding the patents for solar panels, if he hadn't been so damn naive, then he would have been able to buy out all the oil dependence of the US in 20 years time for the whole of the US, and you would have social security being paid with solar panel power that is sold to the electricity grid and sold to the civilians that simply buy the energy and work for it and have their economy, whatever they want to do then. But you would have no ongoing cost. And it's of course it's the same with the housing bubble. The reason why people kept that stupid consumption model for fossil fuel intact was that it was stimulating growth, that there was growth coming out of it, so it was somehow multiplying itself. It seems like a very good idea. People were focusing on that growth aspect, and actually that's what economists say. Well, we need 5% growth, 3% growth. You don't need any growth in society. The growth means inflation, basically. Well, you might correct me on that. Growth doesn't mean inflation, but you say, what if economists said in the past that you need 3% growth in society? What they meant was that the oil production was at such a level that they would have to have increase in money supply and increase in activity in order to consume that oil of 3%. Because these oil wells are hard to control, and if oil comes out, you have to use it, or you want to use it. And if you don't use it, somebody else uses it. So that's there where you have the whole competitiveness. And if you just focus on that aspect of the whole process in the economy, you will be saying, well, we need growth, we need growth, we need growth. But you don't need growth to be wealthy. Actually, you need zero growth to be wealthy. And it's a steady state situation you might end up in. Well, renewables can power growth as well, and it's very clear that if you are stuck with a bunch of money, that it's the smartest thing to do is to buy renewable energies. And another aspect of it, of course, is if the shit hits the fan, if you do that, financially, it's the collapse and all that stuff, you're insured. You have no problem whatsoever. People will need energy. They will work for electricity. They will, of course, I'm not saying they should, and I say, well, you should make it so cheap, but you won't lose if you provide more energy to society with your investment. You will only either be secure in being able to sell something that is yours and that is useful to people. This has a liquidity which is 100%, or cost will go down so much that you won't need the money that you were earning from it anymore. Anyway, that's my thoughts today. In the midst of a financial crisis, you can make very interesting decisions. I hope you do.